Da-na-na-na. 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 Da-na-na-na.
Episode 11.
Woo!
Badly Annotated Reader Society. Yay!
Yay!
My name is Jess,
My name is Hannah.
and today we're going goth. AKA, let's get gothic. Ghosts of Spooky Past.
Yes, yeah, we're going Gothic today.
Yes.
With
Yeah.
the classics.
Mm-hmm.
Finally, another classics episode.
Yay! For those of you that love those.
Mm-hmm.
These ones are all spooky coded classics. So we're going to get some ghosts. We're going to get vampires. We're going to get science experimenty. It's going to be great. It's going to be great.
It'll be fantastic. I'm so excited because we were just talking about this the other day about like, I think it's so bizarre that like with literally any other time period, I'm very like fantasy, romance, like no horror, like nothing. When it comes to classics, literally all I read is like Gothic era, like horror, like classic horror. And it's so weird to me that when you got into classics, you just started with Jane Austen, and I'm like, like knowing what I know about you, wild that you didn't get into this yet.
I mean, in my defense, I introduced myself to classics.
Yeah.
No one like guided me. Okay. I just kind of threw myself in there. And over the past 2 years, like I've read a fair handful of classics. And we're just slowly making our way over to the Gothic horror, and we are enjoying it. I've got a few under my belt now, so we're wading in.
I feel like I just failed you because like I knew when you were getting into classics. Like I could have told you. I could have guided you. I don't know where I was, what I was doing. Like
Gaslight gatekeep girl boss.
I know, I was just keeping it from you. I really should have told you sooner.
Damn. Well, we're here now.
Yeah. But before we begin, how you doing?
I'm doing okay. I've got midterms this coming week. It's Thanksgiving weekend. So
Yeah,
seeing
for all
some
the
family
Canadians.
later. Yeah, for us Canadians. Yeah, I'm almost finished our readathon books. I'm in the last leg of my last one, so that's exciting. Yeah, it's going okay. How about you?
I'm pretty good. I am also having Thanksgiving weekend. I went to my aunt's place yesterday for Thanksgiving dinner, and because she always hosts, there were 12 people.
I know, mine had like 16. I'm like, this is far too many.
Yeah, because originally it was just 8, because it's my aunt, her husband, her 3 kids, and then me and my parents. But then now there's the significant others and the significant others' families, and like my uncle's sister and her son were there. So it was just like a lot of people.
Yep.
But I liked it a lot. It was a lot of fun. We played some board games and hung out. So I'm just having a good restful weekend. I've been using some of that time to work on my murder mystery party that I'm writing for Halloween, because that's coming up fast in a couple of weeks. And so I'm just like working on that, and then just getting back into some school stuff this week. So I'm just kind of chilling.
Fun. Nice.
Yeah.
We also bought a puzzle.
Oh, love a puzzle.
Yeah, it's 1,000 pieces and it's got pretty ladies on it.
Perfect for you.
Yeah.
Great. Awesome. Oh, and then also like last week I purged my room, and I kid you not, got rid of 10 big garbage bags of stuff.
Like love a good purge.
Yeah, of clothes. There were 2 bags of just like trash and recycling that I just needed to get rid of. My friend helped me, and so she actually took a bag of clothes home with her because she was going through my old stuff, and she's like, "Oh my god, this is really cute. Can I have this?" I'm like, "Absolutely, take it. I'm just gonna donate it." So whatever. So she took a bag home, and then so I just got rid of like over half my wardrobe because I decided it was time to start over.
Wow, love that. Do you feel fresh?
I do feel fresh.
That's good.
And there's way less stuff in my room, so that's nice.
Yay.
Yeah, I think that's why I'm like so like relaxed this weekend, because I'm just like got
It's
rid
a
of all that
reset.
stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's my only
Love it.
other update.
Cute.
Yeah.
Well, with that, would you like to jump into it?
You know I do.
Ah, well, first and foremost, we have got the renowned king of Gothic stories, Mr. Edgar Allan Poe. So we read The Telltale Heart. For those of you that don't know, that story is about this younger man, and he's living with this older man, and the older man freaks him out. Okay, he's got a really weird eye, and so the younger guy keeps like very, very dramatically slowly peeking into his room at night.
Yeah, and just like it's sort of like a living haunting, and then
Hmm.
he just like sort of slowly loses his mind over the course of the story, and it's just really fascinating to read, and it's spooky
Yeah.
scary. And I think that between the two of them, I think it's like the younger man is like a caregiver
I think
situation.
so.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so like he's living there to like care for this older man, and then just slowly starts going insane.
So now we get a little spoilery about the Telltale Heart. So if you haven't read it somehow in all of your public school career, this is the educational part. Because in my opinion, the most iconic part of that entire story is right at the very, very end when he finds the beating heart in the floorboards. Oh,
Right.
yep.
Yeah.
Rereading this, it wasn't as spooky as I remembered it being. I remembered it being a lot scarier for some reason, but it was very just like casually unsettling when I read it again recently.
Yeah. And like for me, I appreciate the psychological horror.
Mhm.
And I actually annotated it because like I've never read Poe before, which is shocking. Like before this, for this episode, I hadn't read Poe at all. And so I was like, okay, let me like take some first impression notes about
Uh-huh.
this because I felt like
I also liked how it took him like over an hour just to peek his head in the door because he was going so slowly.
yeah, because he like did not want to be found out at all.
Yeah, like he was putting so much effort in just to poke his head in. It took
Yeah.
so long. The commitment was astounding.
Yeah, really, that's so wild because like he has this commitment to it, but then also it scares him. It's like, buddy, what are you doing? Just go to bed.
Yeah. You know what else you could do? Ignore it.
Yeah, exactly. Like, why don't you just go to sleep? Like, nobody asked you to be in this man's room.
Yeah. Why do you need to see the eye at the middle of the night?
Yeah, yeah. Like,
If it freaks you out, ignore it.
no, this is where like I feel like the elements of like supernatural come in because it seems almost like a supernatural compulsion.
Yeah, like he has to know it. He has to see it. Like it's an obsession.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then it just gets like he also like is addressing the reader the whole time and being like,
Yeah.
you're gonna think I'm crazy, but I swear to you I'm not, and let me explain myself. But then
Yeah.
he just gets crazier and crazier. It's like, buddy, we don't believe you. Like
You're just proving that you're a
yeah.
little bit crazy.
Yeah. It's like the stereotypical like it's almost like a methinks the lady doth protest too much kind of a thing of like being like, I'm not insane, I swear, but like, here's
However,
what's happening. Yeah, yeah,
here's all
exactly.
this insane shit.
Yeah. Big however. Yeah. And then also like this was interesting to read, never having read Poe and also not knowing anything about Poe because usually with the English courses that I've taken when you study a work, we also go really in depth in the author.
Yeah, it's interesting that you never came across Poe.
Yeah, because I've taken multiple Gothic courses because it's just my
Yeah,
favorite
that's so
era
weird to
of.
me.
Yeah, I've never
Because,
gone
like,
into
I
Poe.
think Gothic literature, I think Poe.
Oh, I think Gothic literature, and I think like the picture of Dorian Gray, Jekyll and Hyde, Carmilla, like
We'll
not
get
really a
there.
specific author. Yeah. Not really a specific author, but like the works come to mind for me.
Mhm.
And cuz like it's one of my favorites. But yeah, I just never got around to Poe. I have
Interesting.
I do own like a completed works collection of Poe.
I own one that's all of his poetry specifically.
Yeah, I have an ebook that's literally everything. That's where I got the Telltale Heart from, because I
Oh,
was like, it must be in here.
oh yeah.
So that was the
It's
first time
iconic.
I cracked it open. Yeah.
Wow.
But yeah, so like, I feel like I would have more to say if I knew anything about Poe, but just from like a completely like going in
Objective.
blind
Yep.
perspective, it was really fascinating, and I really liked the like relationship between reader and narrator, and
Yeah.
how you're like seeing inside the mind of this obviously deeply disturbed person.
Yeah. I love psychological pieces like that.
Yeah. It's almost like he's testing the waters a little bit to see like how far he can go to like
Mhm.
terrorize this old man back. Like there was one there's one quote that I highlighted, and I highlighted all these in a specific color, like points where he's like addressing the reader and like talking to the reader about his experience. And there's one quote that was, "The old man's terror must have been extreme. It grew louder, I say, louder every moment. Do you mark me well? I have told you that I am nervous, so I am. And now at the dead hour of the night, amid the dreadful silence of that old house, so strange a noise as this excited me to uncontrollable terror." And then, so like, he seems to be having like these quote unquote normal reactions to what's going on, but
Yeah.
then it just slowly gets creepier and creepier, like of him just slowly becoming more
Or it's just like, my guy, sane people do not do this.
yeah, like buddy.
But like, you're not going to realize that when you're knee deep in the trenches there. Like,
Yeah, I guess not. But yeah, it's just so like, oh, it's just so creepy crawly to like
yeah.
listen to the inner thoughts of this guy's mind.
Uh-huh.
And also the copy I have is illustrated, so I have these like,
Ooh, that's cool. I've never seen the illustrated version.
yeah, I can text it to you. Because there are like these really creepy illustrations of what's going on.
Yeah.
And so like when the police show up,
Uh-huh.
sorry, a little bit of a spoiler. When the police show up and he goes, "I smiled, for what had I to fear? I bade the gentleman welcome." Like, bro,
Yet the entire time he's sitting over top of the beating heart.
yeah, he pulls up a chair and sits on top, like above
And he's
where
like,
in the floor his the evidence is hidden. Like, bro, the audacity. Like,
yeah. Yeah. And he's like,
yeah.
they're not going to look here if I'm sitting here.
Yeah. Well, no, it was, the quote was, "In the enthusiasm of my confidence, I brought chairs into the room and desired them here to rest from their fatigues, while I myself, in the wild audacity of my perfect triumph, placed my own seat upon the very spot beneath which reposed the corpse of the victim."
Yeah.
What?
It's like, if I act super cool and casual, no one will suspect a thing.
Yeah, and it's almost like he's just like reveling in the like poetic
Yeah.
irony of it, like the
Yeah.
dramatic irony. Yeah, so it's just crazy.
Truly.
Yeah, so I don't know, my thoughts generally, because I sorry, I just kind of went first there because I figured
Oh no, we're just bouncing.
yeah, my like uneducated thoughts on Poe is that it's very personal and it's very psychological, and it's like disturbing in a way that's kind of thrilling,
Hmm.
and not necessarily a negative way, which almost like, it's almost like he's asking the reader to consider their own sanity.
Yeah. 'Cause they're like, well, this guy thinks he's normal, so maybe check yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. So like, I don't know, I really enjoyed it, and it was very like, yeah, less scary and less like horrific and more, I mean, it is horrific. The event, hold on a minute. The events of the story are horrific, but I mean like it doesn't,
He went about it in an unhorrific way.
yeah, and so like that is just unsettling. Like it's just
Yeah.
properly unsettling, and I really appreciated it.
Yeah, it gives you just the mildly feeling.
Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts?
So I had read this before. However, I read it a long ass time ago. Um, like I think it was like 6th grade when I first read this story, And then I believe I read it again in 11th grade. And then I read it 2 weeks ago. um, and yeah, for some reason, I remember it being a little bit scarier than I thought it was this time. But this time, I feel like I'm definitely, like, I went into it with more classic literature experience under my belt.
Mhm.
And yeah, it very much just gave me that like mildly unsettling feeling. Like, when you can kind of feel it in your shoulder blades where you're just like, ooh.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, that's what it gave me this time. And I felt like it was very my heebies were somewhat jeebied. Okay.
Just a slight jeeb.
Yeah, there's a little jeeb. Um, and yeah, the part that really stood out to me this time was when he just sat right over top of the heart in the floor, because it's just like, my guy, how confident are you? Like, these cops didn't even ask to sit down with you.
Yeah, it's almost like,
He was like overcompensating for his innocence.
yeah, I didn't even get that impression. I think he was just reveling in the fact that that he is doing these things just because he can, because they don't suspect him. And then
Yeah.
that eventually goes to his head, and so he like loses it and, spoiler, confesses.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, okay, so you're
I
not
love how
as
that was like no time between the spoiler and
yeah.
what happens. They're like, we've already said spoiler multiple times. So
um yeah, I was gonna try to be less spoilery, but it's just so impossible.
yeah, the story is 6 pages long.
Yeah. Yeah, the story is 6 pages long. And even if you know like where this is going, it us talking about it is not even close to the
To
experience
the
of
actual
reading.
experience, yeah. But yeah. So overall, I'll probably end up reading it again at some point. It's short, it's quick, scratches the Gothic itch. So I
Yeah,
really like
it's a
it.
good one. Highly
Yeah.
recommend for this
Mhm.
spooky season.
The Telltale Heart by Edgar Allan Poe.
Nice. A short, sweet one to start off with. Because, okay, I had a question for you on the
Yeah.
topic of classics. Do you rate classics?
Oh yeah. I write everything.
Like, you rate and review them?
Well, keep in mind, my rating system is purely off of vibes, and I usually will rate something right after I finish it, or else I'm just gonna forget. But I do rate my classics.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I do too. Apparently, that's like not like there's a lot of people who don't because
What?
it's a classic. Like, how are you going to rate
So
a classic? And like, it's not like
you're allowed to have
they're
feelings about it.
yeah, so this is my opinion because I generally feel like classic literature and literary scholarship and literary criticism are needlessly inaccessible to the
Like,
average
why
person.
wouldn't you rate it? If
Yeah.
you read it, you can rate it. The only times that you can't rate it is if you DNF.
Yeah. Yeah. So I rated it. Again, never having read Poe and knowing nothing about Poe. And I gave it a 4.25 stars out of 5.
I feel like mine would be right around that mark too.
Yeah, it's a good solid
Yeah.
spooky read. Like if you just want to, especially if it's like the middle of the night and you're going to bed and like you
Hmm.
want to just
And
be
you
a little
just want the
spooked.
vibe.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
good one.
That is a good one. Yeah. Short and sweet for before bed to freak you out.
Yeah. If you want to be
Perfect.
freaked out.
Hmm.
Hmm. For the next one, so we have some short fiction, we have some novels, and then we've got a long poem. So for the other short fiction that we wanted to talk about was The Canterville Ghost by Oscar Wilde.
Hmm.
And I would like to hear your thoughts first. Let's do this in reverse. I would like to hear your thoughts first
Okay.
because I
You
know a lot
recommended
about
it?
Oscar Wilde and I've studied Oscar Wilde's work. And so I would like to know what your like unadulterated
Okay.
impression of this was. So
Do you want to
tell me your
give
thoughts.
like a brief synopsis first?
Oh yeah, so The Canterville Ghost, it's about an American family who moves to this like old manor in England, in Canterville, or either it's a place called Canterville or the manor is called Canterville. Anyways, they're in Canterville. They move there, and very quickly after they move in there, there's this haunting that starts to happen, and yeah, I won't go into detail, but that's the like base description if you want to read like just like it's a haunting, but it's also kind of tongue-in-cheek a little bit. So it's just sort of a fun read for the spooky season. It's one of my favorite pieces of Gothic short fiction. I've written papers about this short story in particular because I just really enjoy it, and I feel like it has a lot to do with like the historical context of the time, which I will get into. But generally it's just like family moves into haunted house.
Yeah. Classic.
In a foreign country. So
yeah. So I went into this completely blind, and I did not realize it was a comedy. I was expecting it to be a horror. It very much was not. No. So that caught me off guard. As soon as the father-husband character offered lubricator to the ghost for his noisy ass chains he was rattling around in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
I was like, whoa, like that's pretty bold of him.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I did annotate this. I printed off the story and annotated it. And so like there's a stain in the library of blood that's just recurring. And one person theorized that the stain would not lift because it was connected to crime, because the ghost, he had killed his wife. So, which was why they think that, you know, he was a ghost because he did this bad thing.
Yeah, and he couldn't like cross over and go to heaven.
And so my note there was right, because if she had spilled blood there naturally instead of from her murder, the stain would of course come out. Like, that's how stains work. And when it was talking about his heavy monocles and rusty gyves?
I don't know.
Are
you talking about the ghost or the family?
The ghost. Gyves. It's talking about the chains rattling around on his wrists and ankles.
Yeah.
I wrote, it's giving Christmas ghost.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah. And yeah, the dad was just so casual about being haunted and coming face to face with this ghost at 3 a.m. And he's like, dude, if you're not going to pay rent and contribute, at least don't be a fucking nuisance. Like, spoil that shit. And then that was the first moment where I was just like, okay, we're not that serious here.
No.
And then the ghost is like recounting all of the spooks and frights that he's given throughout the centuries, about like damsels who were frightened into fainting and people who had to move because they were so afraid of him.
Oh my god, yeah, he's like going through and name dropping his own greatest hits.
Yeah, he is. He's like calling them out by name and like what they did after they saw him. Yeah. Whether it was, you know, sewer slide or moving away or any of the things. Yeah. It's like, yes, the good old days when people were actually afraid of me and not just assholes like these Americans.
Yeah.
And then when he's like trying on different costumes for what kind of like spook he wants to give them, I'm like, it's giving the Grinch having his little fashion show.
Yeah.
He's like, that's it, I'm not going.
Yeah.
And he's got all these little outfits and he like has titles for them all, where what's an example of one? Martin the Maniac or the Masked Mystery. Like, he had like names for all of his costumes
that he named himself.
Yeah.
Because he wasn't notorious enough for other people to name him.
No. Also, mine was illustrated, so I've got fun little images like this.
Yeah. I read that one too.
Yeah, it was pretty good. And and then he got so fed up with the American family that he gave up maintaining the bloodstain.
Yeah.
And like after literal centuries, come on, Ghosty, get it together. And it turns out he had just been using paint from one of the kids, which is why the bloodstain was green at one point.
Yeah, because he ran out of red paint.
They're like, dude, like blood isn't even green. And he's like, I knew someone whose blood was blue once. And it's just like, really, my guy?
Well, because that's like a royalty reference, like Blue Bloods.
But like, come on. Green.
Well, that's the pun. That's the pun. I know someone whose blood was
blue
once.
He's just like losing it. He's losing it.
He's talking about like some like highfalutin family that must have lived there at some point.
Yeah.
Like being like, I knew someone whose blood was blue.
Having a breakdown because these Americans just aren't taking me seriously.
Yeah.
And there ends up being, here's the spoilers, like a sort of poem on a window that says how they can get rid of the ghost. And he's just like, this ghost is depressed. He is mad depressed. Because no one is scared of him anymore. And he's like, I just want to die. Like,
I'm good now. There's no purpose for me.
And then the daughter helps him die, basically. And the family just kind of goes on living after that. And they're like, he left her all of his jewels for helping him die. So, I guess we're rich and no more ghost. But, I really enjoyed it. I've already recommended it to people.
Oh, really?
Yeah, one of my classmates actually scanned my copy at school so that she could read it too.
Yeah.
So she gets to read all of these notes as well. So that's nice. Really fun. And overall, for a short story, which I don't read a lot of, I gave it 5 stars.
Yeah, I think I gave it 5 stars too when I read it.
Yeah, it's great. Fantastic read. Perfect for spooky season, especially if you're like not into horror.
Yeah, it's definitely the vibes more than an actual spook. It's more of just like kind of, it's giving like Casper the Friendly Ghost, but make it sad. Like, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you want like not horror, but still like a fun, spooky time, The Canterville Ghost by Oscar Wilde. Definitely highly recommend. Yeah, it's one of my favorites. I've read a bunch of Oscar Wilde's work.
Is it all like that?
Kind of. It depends. It depends with him. Okay, with his work, it always kind of depended on what he was trying to say.
Gotcha. Okay.
So the reason why I loved this so much at the time that I read it for a class. And so we went into like the whole historical context of like the narrative choices that were made and like how it would have been received by the readers at the time and things like that. And a really, really common thing with Gothic literature and why it had emerged is that the horror of it has to do with playing out their actual practical fears in their real life in some sort of dramatized or supernatural way. So this one, it is definitely a comedy. It's definitely like tongue-in-cheek, and it sort of pokes fun at British fears of the Americans at the time.
Absolutely.
Because that was like Industrial Revolution. The Americans had this reputation for, and this is just like, I'm just paraphrasing what I learned in this university class that I took. They had this reputation for being like very pragmatic and very industrious and like not really being that concerned with the like long-standing British culture that had been in place for so long. And so there was a lot of fear at the time about the Americans coming in and disrupting the social order and the way that things were supposed to be with their gadgets, like the oil that he gives to the ghost. Yeah. Or the stain remover they use on the blood stain. Like they see a blood stain and they're like, oh, get that stain out immediately. Like they're not even concerned. And so like that's sort of representative of like the fears at the time of
Makes sense.
The Americans coming in and just like completely disrupting everything. But they the writing usually did it in like some sort of a supernatural way, like with the ghost. So like the ghost as being representative of this long-standing tradition that the Industrial Revolution is now coming in and changing, and obviously like in a time of change like that, there's going to be a lot of fear. So a lot of Gothic literature emerged that way. So long story short, TLDR, Wilde's work had a lot to do with saying things like that, and so it just sort of depended on what was being said, because like the Picture of Dorian Gray is actual horror.
Oh, okay.
That's like his one novel that he says a lot about like aestheticism and that whole movement. So like it just depends. But I appreciated this a lot. I also myself love a good satire, love a good sardonic, tongue-in-cheek sort of comedy.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, I love this one a lot. And yeah, there's a lot of really interesting dynamics and historical context that play into it that I also just thought were interesting. But obviously you don't need all of that to enjoy the story.
I didn't have
it. Yeah. I just gave you the abridged version. So it's just, I don't know, it's a cool story. That's what I had written about when I wrote on it. But yeah, it's just a good one. It's just a fun time.
It's a silly, goofy time with some spooks. And yeah, that was The Canterville Ghost by Oscar Wilde.
So I think next we are moving into our novels. So we're going to start with Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde by Robert Louis Stevenson. And this is about a doctor, a scientist, who is doing all kinds of experiments to try to eradicate the evil from within himself. And thus then later to eradicate evil from all people. It's sort of like a doctor developing a drug kind of a thing of like doing the trials and trying to see if there's this way that he can help other people. And then obviously the experiment goes horribly awry. So that's the main premise. It's sort of like medical horror kind of
in
a thing.
Sense, yeah.
Yeah, in that way. But it also has a lot to do with the inner darkness and inner evil of humanity and kind of examining.
Definitely ties in the psychological aspects.
Yeah, like going into like the psychological darkness of like the human condition. Basically, it's kind of heavy.
Yeah. And so that was our unspoilery part.
Yeah. Yeah, if you're interested in that kind of a thing, the psychological aspect, the are we born, like if you've ever been interested in the philosophical question of whether or not humans are born evil or good, or we're inherently good or evil, this is definitely like a very interesting read for you.
I first read this last October, I think, about a year ago now. And I managed to not have any spoilers before reading it. I didn't know what happened until I read it.
Oh, that's crazy. Because like everyone knows Jekyll and Hyde.
I did not. Okay. And so this is where I'm going to spill all of the beans.
And I'm going to say this right now. If you somehow don't know the ending of Jekyll and Hyde, have never heard of Jekyll and Hyde, stop this right now and go read it and then come and talk to us. Because if you haven't already been spoiled, do not let this show spoil it now.
No, it's
skip
worth
all
the
of this
experience of reading it for the first time, and I can personally vouch for that.
I feel like Jekyll and Hyde's pretty common. Everyone knows.
I didn't.
Well, I feel like it's like how everyone knows that Darth Vader is Luke's father, you know? Like, I feel like everyone knows
I
Jekyll
did not
and
know that Dr. Jekyll turned into Mr. Hyde.
Oh,
okay.
Yeah.
I had no idea. So when that happened, I was just like the gasp. I gasped. Okay. I was floored. I was so shocked. I went, oh my God, how did I not hear any of this ever?
Yeah.
Impressive. Just shows how much my head is in the sand.
When it comes to like movies and stuff too, because it's referenced often in film.
Yeah. I had no clue that they were one and the same. And that, like, he basically separated his, like, quote unquote evil side of himself. Like,
Yes.
if you've ever seen the show Severance, like, it kind of gives me that vibe where a part of your personality and cognitive self is severed
Mhm.
from what you want, like what you consider to be the quote unquote real you. And yeah, I was shooketh. Okay.
Yeah, it's so good because the whole time you're reading it almost like a dual POV, like you're
Yeah.
hearing about Hyde and you're hearing about Jekyll, and Jekyll's not aware of Hyde for a really long time.
hmm He like tries to like stop in on him. Like he goes to Hyde's apartment and is just like, "Hey, like, is this guy here?" And they're like, "Nah, dude. He only pops by every few days." He's
Yeah.
like, "Huh, that's weird."
Oh my god, and I just woke up tired as if I've been running all night. What the heck? like
Yeah.
yeah, it's really fascinating and it's also just like a fun read.
Mhm.
It's a good thriller. I
Yeah.
liked it a lot because it's just there's this horror involved of like there being this other part of yourself like doing acting and doing things and thinking that like you aren't aware of. It's almost like
Yeah.
a sort of fear of the subconscious kind of a thing, or
Mhm.
like fear of like
Mhm.
the darkness that can be
Like
lying
within you.
within you, that like is gonna like gain autonomy and take over. Like this is
Yeah.
the ultimate playing out of that fear. And I loved it when I read it. And I read it knowing what happened because like I already knew about Jekyll and Hyde. Like it just so I wasn't as shocked. I could see it coming because I had been spoiled. But yeah, I wish that I could have just like gone in blind.
Experienced it like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was pretty magical. I was so surprised. Like as I read it, I was like, I can't believe I've never heard this.
Yeah.
Like as I'm
Yeah.
flipping through.
Yeah, well, Jekyll and Hyde became like a common trope. It became like an icon
Yeah, and like
for
after reading it, I can like notice where like things were based off of it, and like I
yeah.
can see the references now, but not having known went straight over my head.
Yeah, because Jekyll and Hyde became an icon for that philosophical questioning of like
hmm
humanity and the self, and how there can be like these split even in like the references to like the devil on one shoulder and the angel on the other,
Yeah.
like Jekyll and Hyde became an icon for that image. And so because it's fascinating to think that like there's this complexity to just being a person, and like
Yeah.
a complexity to personality and motivations and things like that. And the fact that Dr. Jekyll is so unaware of Hyde for so long, that's where the
hmm
horror is for me personally.
Yeah.
Because it's like, how could you be like just morphing into this weird beast and going and doing all these evil things and not know? That was the scary part for me. And I really appreciated that a lot. That's the sign of a good horror to me. So I loved this book. It's still one of my favorites. And it's also not very long. It's a pretty short novel, and it's a good one for this time of year
Mm.
for sure. So that's Jekyll and Hyde. I think that was another one I gave it 5 stars. Like I just loved it. So yeah, if you're looking for that kind of philosophical kind of a mix of science messing with nature and like all of those sorts of themes in horror,
Little body horror.
yeah, a little bit of body horror, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde by Robert Louis Stevenson. Oh yeah, that book also has like the greatest pun of all time. The name Mr. Hyde, like as in hidden, as in hiding. Like
Ha ha
there's a
ha.
yeah, dual meaning there. And there's one line where Dr. Jekyll thinks to himself, if he be Mr. Hyde, I shall be Mr. Seek.
Yes.
Yeah, and I just love that so much.
Yeah, that was pretty good.
Yeah, the dual meaning there. Appreciate that. So, anyways, the next novel that we looked at was Carmilla by Joseph Sheridan Le Fanu.
hmm
Carmilla deserves more credit, in my opinion,
Oh my god, she does.
because Dracula is constantly referenced as like the
Uh-huh.
birthplace of vampires and vampire fiction. But
He
Carmilla,
was inspired.
Yeah.
By this bitch.
Yeah, he was inspired by Carmilla. Carmilla was like it predated Dracula,
Uh-huh.
and it also thematically, I haven't read Dracula, but I just like have heard a lot about it in ambient literary circles. I think that Carmilla thematically does vampires better.
Oh my gosh, she does it so good.
Yeah, yeah,
It is now my favorite form of vampire, just to put that out there.
yeah,
Oh, she is iconic. She checks all the boxes. She
yeah.
is scary. Like, she plays with her victims.
Yeah, she's scary, but then there's also that like slight undertone of like sexual tension.
Yeah, which makes it like even freakier when you really think about the psychology behind it.
Yeah.
Mm.
She deserves to be credited as the birthplace of vampire fiction. I know that vampires have been around for in folklore for like a bajillion years, but I feel like Carmilla just did it so well.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's basically about this young girl who is living with her uncle, I believe.
Father? The book starts when she's like young, and she wakes up with this really freaky dream. And then there's this woman in her room that just kind of like comforts her. And like she lays down beside her and she basically just falls asleep and then wakes up with bursting pain below her collarbone.
Mhm.
Okay. Years later, her father, I'm pretty sure it's her father.
So she's like living in this sort of secluded like manor in the mountains kind of a thing, like the nearest neighbor is miles and miles away and she's staying there with this family member, and that's where like all of this stuff starts to take place.
Yeah. And there's like some sort of carriage crash,
Hmm.
carriage accident by one of the roads near this manor.
Yeah,
And
already weird because it's so secluded.
yeah, and the fact that they just happened upon it.
Yeah.
Where in this carriage there was a few women. There's like a mother, her daughter, and another being inside the carriage that they never fully see.
Yeah.
But the mother is basically like, "Oh, I have this important business and my daughter, like, she can't make it now because of this crash, like she needs to rest." And the dad is just like, "Oh, well, our manor is like right over there. We were going to have this other house guest, but she actually just died and my daughter's really sad about it. So like if your daughter wants to come hang out with her instead, that'd be
Yeah,
cool."
which is also so creepy because it's also giving changeling
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
like doppelganger replacement. Like,
Uh-huh.
yeah.
So yeah, they were expecting his friend's daughter to come hang out, but that didn't happen because she died.
Yeah, of like some illness.
Yeah. The mom just goes, "Okay, that'll work, but she's not to tell you anything about our family, where we're from, what business I'm going to do, anything like that. I'll be back in 3 months."
Yeah, you take my kid for these 3 months, but you cannot know anything about us or our names or anything. Like, sorry, no.
Yeah,
You can
full
you
stop.
I'll let you help me, but you cannot ask questions.
Yeah, which weird. Okay.
Yeah, so like then, they take in this girl and things ensue very quickly.
The shock value, this is where we start talking about the real plot, is when the daughter and Carmilla meet each other for the first time after her dad goes, "Yeah, we'll take your kid," because they both pause and they go, "I saw you in my dream years ago, but you look
Right,
like this now. But I
right.
saw you looking like this a decade ago."
Yeah.
And so, timeline wise, in my head, they're young adults here.
Yeah, I just googled it. They're 18, 19 for the bulk of the story.
Oh, I'm on top. I'm a, oh, thank you.
You are
Thank you.
on top of it with the literary interpretation. Yeah. Yeah. So, like, that's sort of the inciting incident is they both discuss and realize that they both had the same dream about each other.
Yeah, years prior.
Yeah. And then they become friends, and then a whole bunch of weird crap starts
Yeah,
happening.
friends. Gals being pals in that time period.
It's giving, and they were roommates. Like
And they were roommates.
it's very queer coded for sure.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
remember the first thing I texted you about this, because this was your recommendation,
Yeah.
was this is a much more sapphic than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, which is like a big theme because there was a lot of fiction around that time about women and female sexuality
Mhm.
and like the quote unquote loss of innocence, and like, because it's all kind of, there's a lot of like sort of religious
Yeah.
undertone
Yeah.
novels and fiction about sapphic relationships and things like that, and like the monstrous woman. I don't know if anyone knows about like the monstrous woman archetype, about these women that are portrayed as monsters are really
Mhm.
just like
Just actual just women.
who are like sex
Just
and body
women,
positive
period.
and living their lives. Yeah, like they're being, oh no, they're being too wild and they're being too like,
Any modern woman.
yeah, basically a modern woman that's like the monstrous woman.
Yeah.
My favorite representation, just as like a side note, my favorite representation of the monstrous woman is in the Odyssey with Circe. If that kind of a thing interests you, and in terms of like gender studies and that kind of thing, definitely check out Circe. I think it's like book 9 of the Odyssey. So anyways, side note, but yeah, so this is sort of like that too.
Yeah. And so, yeah, the psychological. Okay, I know we've said this word a lot this episode already, but the psychological aspect of this book
Yeah.
was unmatched. Okay, the fact that Carmilla builds this friendship, a little bit more than friendship. They are with each other day in, day out. And there's still this intrigue about, where she comes from, all this, because
Yeah.
she will not say.
We're only given her name, which is
Yeah,
Carmilla. The weird
Carmilla.
girl's name is Carmilla, by the way.
Yeah. And then the dad's friend, the one whose daughter died, just shows up one day and he goes, yo, some shit has happened. Let me tell you all about it, as we go over to these ruins. Yep, that's the word, ruins. Because I gotta find some shit, okay? So, like, come with me, I'll tell you what happened.
We're following a lead, but I'm not telling you anything about it. Just come with me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you'll get it.
Like, bestie, we don't have time. You just need to come with me right now. Trust the process.
Yeah, he tells this tale of how him and his daughter went to this ball, and at this ball, there was this woman who was like, "Hey, we know each other. Do you remember?" And he doesn't. And she goes, "No, no, no. Trust me. We're cool. We're friends." And
Gaslight,
his
gatekeep,
daughter
girl boss.
starts speaking to her daughter, whose name was Millarca.
Millarca, yeah.
Yeah. And if any bells are ringing for you, hold on to that. And so this entire time they're talking, and it's like a masquerade, okay? So he can't see her face.
Yeah.
And she just insists that they know each other. And then she gets called away suddenly, and oh, but her daughter can't come with her because she's been ill. She can't go with her mom right now. So would you mind watching her? And he goes, well, I guess so. Like we must know each other, so sure. Like I'll do you this solid.
Yeah, because she also knew stuff about him or something like that.
Yeah.
Like convinced him that they must know each other.
Exactly, yeah. And so he agrees to take in her daughter, and his daughter and Malarca slowly become closer and closer. And over that time, his daughter was getting sicker and sicker, just like the main girl that we were talking about previously. She was slowly becoming more and more ill, just an incessant pallor. She was pale, she felt weak, she'd be in bed for longer. And so there were some red flags. Okay, the stories were just a little bit too similar.
Mhm.
And ultimately, as we know, his daughter died. And so while he's telling this tale, it's like, hey, like, just hear me out. This is important. And when they get to this ruin, he's like, okay, we gotta find this bitch's grave, okay? And then the bitch shows up. And he goes, "That's her." And they're like, "No, no, no. That's Carmilla, not Malarca." And
Yeah.
he goes, "I know her when I see her. That bitch killed my daughter."
Yeah. So that's sort of like where we have the standoff. And like, I don't want to tell anyone because I feel like you just have to read it. Of like where like suddenly everything falls into place and we get all of the answers, and it's almost like that Spider-Man meme where they're all standing around pointing at each other. Like, yeah. And so like you do end up getting the full story of who Carmilla
and like the
actually
lore
is.
of the vampires.
Yes.
How they work. Oh.
Yeah. So like,
yeah.
Just read it.
One thing that I do want to point out, just because I thought it was the most unsettling detail, in my opinion, was when they pulled out the casket and it was full of like 7 inches deep of blood.
Yeah.
That is a lot of blood, my guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, oof. My creepies were crawling.
Yeah. Maximum Jeeb.
Yeah. Max Jeeb.
Yeah. The whole name thing, Carmilla,
yeah, she
Malarca.
was bound to her name. There was another one as well. It was like Mercalla.
Yeah, something like that.
I
Because
think Mercalla was the original name.
maybe. But Carmilla is spelled Carmilla, and then Milarca was Millarca. So like obviously the names are anagrams for each other. And then also I thought it was funny that Milarca sounds a lot like malarkey, as in lies, as in like fake, as in not true. That is really funny. Really appreciated that because I am one to always go through looking for the Easter eggs.
This one was full of them.
This one was full of them. Like, I remember the first time that I read it. After reading it, I immediately went back and like read it again because I wanted to see how all this stuff came to be, because there were so many clues. There are so many stereotypes and cliches of vampires, like not the whole like garlic and can't enter without being invited thing, but like there's also the cliches of like how being fed upon by a vampire is like this euphoric pleasure, and like there's that sort of sexual undertone to it, which then also goes hand in hand with like the sapphic sort of codedness of it. So it's almost like you get the real story about vampires and vampire lore and things like that in a way that I really, really liked, especially for spooky season. So, which I did read this at a weird time of year because this was a class that I took in the spring. So I'm just like, it's like so sunny outside and I'm sitting here like reading this book.
Blood and death.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And no, it's definitely my favorite form of vampire now.
Yeah. I think last episode or the episode before I was talking about the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix. If you like this, like if you read Carmilla, or just for you, Jess, if you read Carmilla and like that style of vampire, for sure check out the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires, because that book wasn't my favorite, but it is that type of vampire fiction. I loved it a lot. I liked the way that it approached female relationships and like female sexuality, and it did it in a like this came up in Gothic literature because that was a fear of the time. Women gaining autonomy and having these relationships and any kind of queerness that might involve women, like, you know, these were fears of the time, and so that comes through in Gothic literature. So I thought that was really cool to read and to see how those fears in history, because I love history, those fears in history manifest in these works. I guess maybe that's why Gothic literature really just like gets me.
Yeah. It just taps into the human experience and fears.
Yeah, for sure. Especially the Gothic novel. There's quite a few. So it was just a really good solid read, especially for this time of year. Highly recommend. And I'm pretty sure Carmilla is like open source online, so you can read it for free.
Yeah, it's even on Kindle Unlimited, I believe, if you dig far enough. But you can definitely read it online for free.
Yeah, same with the Canterville Ghost. That's also open source online.
Yeah, it is.
So what are you doing?
Yeah,
Read
just do
them.
it.
They're free.
Our next one is also free.
Yeah, so it's like, read them free online. And I feel like these works that we're talking about especially are a very good intro to classics if this kind of genre is your thing and you've never
If
been
you're
into
wanting to wade
classics.
into it, these
These are good solid places
Gothic
to start.
classic for beginners.
Yeah. So yeah, next one also free online is so now we're moving out of novels, and the next one is Goblin Market by Christina Rossetti, and it's a long poem, but it tells a story. So
Yes.
it is very poetic and musical, and so like it's a good way to get into classic poetry because it's got like an easy to follow narrative. And it's about these two sisters who are walking home from the market or something to the town, and they come across these goblin men who are basically selling fruit. But there's this legend locally about how like for young girls, like you should always avoid the goblin men. Do not take their fruit. Do not buy anything from them. Don't take anything from them. Do not let them come anywhere near you. Like they're super dangerous, and don't ever deal with the goblin men. And so it's almost like this cautionary legend for young women. Well, they actually come across these goblin men walking home one day, and one of the sisters does take the fruit. They give into temptation, and then they have to deal with that. And
they have to face the consequences of their own actions.
Yeah, precisely. And so it's an interesting read. And I think poetry-wise, it's also just good poetry. And the whole thing to me sort of seemed like an extended metaphor for like cautioning young women against giving in to men in like a sexual way.
Yeah.
And like not giving into temptation in general, like with substance use, like with the fruit. So like the whole thing's kind of an extended
Holding
metaphor.
yourself accountable. Don't just eat the first fruit that pops in front of you.
Yeah.
Don't listen to men, etc., etc.
It's giving like I don't know if you've ever really read German fairy tales, but like they're all really horrifying in order to scare children out of doing anything. And at least the ones that I've come across, like Krampus and that kind of a thing, it's kind of like that. Like it's very much a cautionary tale.
Yeah, because like when the goblin fruit is eaten, like it's basically poison, okay? Like it will slowly cause you to degrade in health until you perish. And even once your body is buried, like they had a friend that also ate the fruit, and when she died and when she was buried, like the soil that she was buried in was rotten. Nothing will grow there.
Yeah.
So there's some serious health concerns from eating this fruit.
Yeah, but for the person who eats the fruit, it feels like the only sustenance that they can ever have, and like it feels like such a high, I guess, almost that like they to the point where they like refuse all other food, and so then that's when the health starts to decline and all kinds of things. So like for the person who eats the fruit, it's like the best food they've ever had, but it's actually like slowly killing them. So like drugs.
Yeah, like drugs. And so I annotated this morning.
Nice.
I read it last week, but I annotated it this morning. And I've got a couple of notes that I just feel like you would enjoy.
Okay.
So I'm just going to take a moment to just read the first stanza.
Okay.
So it is: morning and evening, maids heard the goblins cry, "Come buy our orchard fruits, come buy, come buy. Apples and quinces, lemons and oranges, plump unpecked cherries, melons and raspberries, bloom down-cheeked peaches, swart-headed mulberries, wild free-born cranberries, crab apples, dewberries, pineapples, blackberries, apricots, strawberries." All ripe together in summer weather, morns that pass by, fair eves that fly, come by, come by. Are grapes fresh from the vine, pomegranates full and fine, dates and sharp bullaces, rare pears and green gages, damsons and bilberries, taste them and try. Currants and gooseberries, bright fire-like barberries, figs to fill your mouth, citrons from the south, sweet to tongue and sound to eye, come by, come by. My note on that was these guys would love capitalism.
Yeah. Yeah, they would.
Yeah, they would
Which
thrive.
also, like, probably is part of the literary interpretation that can be drawn from this, because this is all around the time capitalism was barely just starting to be a twinkle in someone's eye in the Western world. So, like, it also kind of has to do with that a little bit as well.
Yeah, I also liked that the goblins, they were each visually sort of unique. Like, one had a cat's face, one had a tail, one walked like a rat, one crawled like a snail. So they were all scarily unique, and I love when monsters or aliens or just fantastical species like that have that one aspect in that they're all just a little bit different, because I feel like it increases the horror aspect, the horror volume.
Yeah, because, like, even if you meet one, you won't know what to expect from the next one.
Another. Yeah. So I really liked that detail.
Yeah, it was definitely really cool for that.
Yeah, and then I also highlighted this one line that I felt like sort of described just the sisters as, like, right after the first one had eaten that fruit and just, like, where they're at. And it says, one content, one sick in part, one warbling for the mere bright day's delight, one longing for the night. Because the goblins only come out at night as well. And yeah, that rhyme I just felt was very, very nice, very fitting.
Yeah, it's good poetry.
It is. It is.
It's also easy to read.
Yeah, like, it doesn't follow a strict,
like, rhyme scheme.
Exactly. Like, a lot of things do rhyme in it, but it's not like this, it's not like an ABAB format.
Yeah, or like it doesn't have a set like metric.
Yeah, it switches it up.
And it doesn't matter about the syllables and things like that. It's sort of just generally musical, and that's why I say it's a good place to start too if you want to get into classic poetry, because it's got a compelling narrative and it's far easier to read than a lot of other stuff, and so it's a good, like, beginner poem for sure.
Exactly. One last note that I'm going to mention is, so I'll read this one stanza and then I'll tell you the note on it. So it says, till Laura dwindling seemed knocking at death's door, then Lizzie weighed no more, better and worse, but put a silver penny in her purse, kissed Laura, crossed the heath with clumps of firs, at twilight halted by the brook, and for the first time in her life began to listen and look. And so that's Laura or Lizzie just deciding, you know what? Like, my sister is going to die. I need to do something. And my note is, Laura's about to die. Fuck it. We ball. Lizzie, probably.
Yeah, pretty much. Like, she was like, you know what? If I don't do something, like
she's gonna die either way, so I might as well give it a shot.
Yeah. Fuck it, we ball.
Fuck it, we ball. Lizzie, probably.
Yeah. Yeah. It's poetically enjoyable, and also the narrative is really interesting. And I like the sisterhood. I like that, like, it's her sister that finally, you know, saves her when nobody else it has previously been saved from these goblin men. Because, you know, according to the lore, these,
like, once you're done, you're done.
Yeah, exactly. Coming across these goblins is a death sentence. And Lizzie really just said no.
Yeah.
She was like, enough is enough. She was a woman on a mission.
And yeah, I don't quite understand how it was like an antidote, so to speak, but it was, and that's what matters.
Well, because the whole thing is, like, you eat the fruit, and then that's, like, the only sustenance you can have. That's all you can have.
But then as soon as she gets it again, then she's
fine.
good.
Yeah, because it's a curse.
Oh, that's yeah, because she couldn't hear the goblin men after she ate them. Like they just like
Yeah, you can never find them again. And so
yeah.
you're like doomed to want after this fruit forever and you'll never be able to find it again. But because Lizzie faced them and survived and was able to come back
Mm,
with the fruit, the curse was broken because she got it again.
gotcha, gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't think curse. I just thought poison.
Oh. Yeah, well, I mean there's definitely a supernatural
That
element
makes
for
more sense.
sure.
I'm
So,
I'm caught up. I'm there. I'm
yeah.
there.
Yeah, so yeah, spoilers. That's how
Yay.
Lizzie saves her sister.
Cute. And yeah, that was The Goblin Market by Christina Rossetti.
Yeah, which is
Yay.
like love literature by women.
Yeah. Women supporting women.
Yeah. It's a good one for sure. So those are our favorite gothic classics for spooky season.
Hmm. And yeah, a lot of them are free. So like do yourself a favor. Just do it.
Yeah, it's cheaper than buying other modern spooky books. So,
Exactly. And then you get to come talk to us about it.
yeah.
Which you can do on Instagram or Threads at Badly Annotated Pod, or you can email Hannah at badlyannotedpod@gmail.com. And Hannah got her first email.
I did get my first email. It was from London, but but I appreciate it nonetheless. I emailed her back yesterday. I'm really excited.
Yay.
I got an email.
So, for those of you who have been following along, our endless pleas for
My demands really for an
yeah,
email.
yeah, the wishes have been met.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean that I don't want more emails. I will
No,
always want more emails. Please tell me
yes,
your literary thoughts, especially if
yes,
you read something we recommend. I would love to hear it.
please. Yeah, and if for some reason you're not sure where to stream us, not sure how you're listening, but if you got this far and you want to know, in our Instagram bio, you can find all of our streaming links. And so, with that, best wishes, warmest regards, happy spooky season.
Sincerely, Jess and Hannah.